The Saints are turning our expectations upside down, which also means we're turning our ranks upside down. I got Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler joining me now on the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here. I'm here with Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler. And Theo has also got a brand new podcast he's doing with Scott Barrett. I want to jump right in with that. Welcome, Theo, and congrats on the new gig.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm sort of I'm everywhere right now. I've got my shows over at Player Profiler and also School of Scott with Scott Barrett over at the Fantasy Points Network. And I'm excited to talk to you. I'm actually podcasting with Alan Soslowski tomorrow.
Nice.
So we're roto-wired out here.
Awesome. And I jumped on with you last year, doing a lot of great work in this space. So let's jump right into it. Week 3. I mean, it's panic time for a lot of us there. If you're 0-2, if you're the Ravens, the Bengals, the Jaguars, the Colts, the Rams, you had these expectations. If you're like that in fantasy, you had these expectations. Oh my God. Well, my expectations are wrong. Let's change this. You can get pretty panicky sometimes with some of these ranks, some of these decisions.
Yeah, nowadays, like this season, a big advantage is if you have IR spots in your league, because there's a bunch of these guys we know are not going to play, and they're not IR eligible right now. So it's the whole thing is a mess. It's about as crazy let's call it like a 48-hour period as we've ever seen in terms of injuries. We even lost Evan Ingram in warmups, so like it's really messed up right now.
It really is. And 2 weeks in a row, we've had the before game surprise. It was Evan Ingram this week. At least the Eagles had the decency to let us know 2 days in advance, unlike the Niners who let us know an hour and a half on Monday night. I'm like, come on, guys. You knew on Friday. Tell us. So ridiculous.
And how about a beat reporter for San Francisco? Like maybe just mention, well, you're going to see increased Mason, maybe Christian McCaffrey. Like they knew. They all knew.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you. All right, let's talk quarterbacks right off the top here. Baker Mayfield, he's been kind of cruising so far. Not a huge fantasy day, although he got the rushing touchdown. Gets a home game against the Denver Broncos. Has he moved into the circle of trust? Can we start him this week?
I think for it's definitely team context. But yeah, I mean Baker Mayfield last year finished as a QB1. We love what they're doing with Chris Godwin. We've seen what he can do with Mike Evans. We saw what Mike Evans did in week 1. He's got 2 legitimate weapons. We've got an offense that knows what they're doing. And I really like the 2 rookies. Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan give this offense a little bit more of an edge. Yeah. So Baker Mayfield is completely comfortable. And the guy was quarterback 11 last year. So him taking a slight step forward this year is not out of the question, giving us potentially a top 6 season. He's QB1 right now. I think it's a positive matchup because I think Denver, it just might break this week. Last week, they gave such a good defensive effort, had an opportunity against Pittsburgh, couldn't score at all. Bo Nix looks awful. I think Tampa Bay is going to really just Todd Bowles against that offense. That's trouble. And I think that Baker Mayfield will also benefit from that in the home environment. So I think Baker this week is probably a guy that I'd put into the top 8 or 9 quarterbacks.
I like it a lot. I have them in a lot of places. So I hope you're right. I'm kind of bullish. I've got a lot of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin too. So, Baker doing well means good news for them. I am a West Coast card carrying Bengals fan. It's been a little rough so far, although I'm encouraged by the game against the Chiefs. How high does he go this week? Is he like, are we back? This great matchup, home matchup on Monday night against the Commanders. Are we back? Are we back to Burrow being a safe start?
You're certainly getting elevated because of the matchup. Washington is just an absolute joke of a defense. They're the one defense where we really want to target them as much as possible, not only for the quarterbacks, if you're a quarterback streamer, but also for secondary targets. But the number one target and the quarterback, whether it's almost always a wide receiver 1. But last year we had that random Darren Waller game where he had his best game of the year against Washington as well. If Cincinnati doesn't look really, really good offensively this week, I will be surprised. We all saw what Malik Neighbors was able to accomplish last week.
Right.
It's got to be a Jamar Chase get right game. It's got to be a Joe Burrow game. Do they let that have a little bit of a hangover from the Kansas City Chiefs loss, or do they use it as motivation to stomp on a team that they're clearly better than on paper? I think probably the latter. I think you're comfortably starting Burrow and comfortably excited. If Jamar Chase was your first round pick, this is the week where you're like, okay, this is why I took the guy in the first round.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm worried about the bracketing. I mean, the Commanders have internet too, so they can see what the Chiefs did, and they limited the Chase pretty well. But if T. Higgins is back on Monday night, all of a sudden that dynamic changes quite a bit too. They won't be able to do that, be able to spend as much on that there. So I think they'll be okay. But yeah, I am starting Burrow this week, so for what it's worth, and I would start him over Baker, for instance. I like that one a lot. Next on my list, Derek Carr. Okay, let's start this conversation on the Saints. It is, after these first two games, we have to. I mean, we have to talk about. I've said the phrase pre-snap motions more times than I can remember in one given week after the Saints performance.
It's the talk of fantasy, and it's warranted. And I'll say that the craziest thing about this game, if I would have told you in July that the Saints are going to be favorites over the Philadelphia Eagles in week 3, then you'd probably would have been like, Theo, that must mean that Jalen Hurts got hurt in week 1 or week 2. They're home favorites over the Philadelphia Eagles. It is such a dramatic shift in the way we're looking at them. They look like a Big 12 team out there. They put up 47 points, 40 plus in week 1, completely stomped the Dallas Cowboys. And Derek Carr, like, the guy looks fantastic. And they're doing some things stylistically that are really interesting. They're running only like 2 or 3 receivers sometimes on routes and keeping more blockers in. So it's really consolidated a lot of these targets. He's got the 2 fast wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed playing over his head, and Chris Olave due for a breakout game. Both those guys strong starts. And then Alvin Kamara playing such a high level of football as well. So for me, it's like Derek Carr, this could be the Derek Carr year. We talked about Baker Mayfield last year. Baker Mayfield finishes as a QB1. We also had Jordan Love drafted as essentially a QB2, finishes as a QB1. Sam Howell finishes as a QB1. But the year before, we had Geno Smith finish as a top 6 quarterback, and Geno was sort of in this left for dead range of ADP. That's Derek Carr. The vibes for Derek Carr right now feel a lot like 2022 Geno Smith for me, where I think this could be his random career year. And I think it speaks volumes to Kubiak. It also speaks volumes to the quality of offensive line play he has right now.
Right.
I had him as my number 2 overall waiver wire addition. And I go like kind of like shallow leagues, like 30% of guys who are available in 70% of Yahoo leagues or more is sort of my cutoff. So there's a couple of guys you could say would have been ahead of him. But in terms of like deep leagues, Derek Carr is the best option you have this week. I know I have a lot of Wednesday night waiver leagues, and I'm going to have bids on Derek Carr right now. I am very confident in this offense, and I think they handle Philadelphia this week on that short week.
Yeah, I think that helps them a lot being at home and when the Eagles being on a short week. And I also wonder a little bit whether he's going to need a little bit more volume this week. I think the Eagles will move the ball against the Saints. So I think that you're not going to see them win with 16 passes this week. You're not going to be able to run on the Eagles as readily, I think, although Bijan certainly ran pretty well. So I don't know. We'll see about that. But I do think it's going to be more of a passing game. So this is going to be a good test, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right. We're going to talk running backs next, but first, got a quick note from our friends at Underdog. We're proud to partner with them for the NFL season. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play in fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. In addition to their popular best ball contest, Underdog also offers great DFS pick'em games. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night by picking between 2 and 8 players to build a pick'em entry. You can certainly jump in on that Thursday night game between the Jets and the Pats. See if you're all in on the Breece Hall projection and whether you want to go more or less on that. They're higher or lower. You can kind of jump in on that and have a lot of fun with that. Sign up with RWNFL to claim your free pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with my promo code RWNFL to claim your free pick plus a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. I'm here with Theo Gremminger. We are talking for week 3, some matchups that we like, dislike, some players we're concerned about. Let's jump right into the next section here, talk about running backs. J.K. Dobbins, it was considered to be kind of the lesser part of a platoon with Gus Edwards going into the season, at least according to ADP. Now, J.K. Dobbins is the guy, clearly the top guy in that offense, although it's interesting, they're still splitting carries. What's your level of confidence starting him against the Steelers this week, though?
So this is a difficult matchup. This is Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's home opener. You're going west to east.
Mm-hmm.
But Dobbins is playing at a very, very high level. He's been very, very efficient. I think this week is a week where they're going to have to use him as a receiver out of the backfield a little bit more, which is something that they've talked about with him, but they really haven't had to do so much. The Pittsburgh presents a big test. I think for me, adjust Dobbins. He's probably a little bit more of a low-end RB2 because of the difficult matchup, but it's hard to get away from using him pretty much any week he's healthy this year. It seems like this coaching staff and him have like meshed together so well, and it's been the J.K. Dobbins season over 2 weeks that we've been waiting for a long, long time. The guy's had such poor injury luck, and this year it's sort of it's a perfect fit with Harbaugh and Roman, where you have a coach trying to establish like this toughness, this running the ball culture, an offensive coordinator who gets a lot out of the running game every single year, combined with this running back who's just, we've been waiting on it and waiting on it and waiting on it. So for me, I think like a lot of people are on the sell J.K. Dobbins, let's sell J.K. I'm actually kind of on the opposite. I picked him up in a dynasty league. I think that the whole market is saying to sell the guy because they think he's going to get hurt again. But
Sure.
But he's got this incredible utility, and where you selected him in your redraft league is pretty low. So I think you just ride J.K. Dobbins out. But again, adjust your expectations for this week. This is not the Carolina Panthers. This is a different kind of front seven and a team that's going to put pressure on them.
Yep. Uncle Ted says Dobbins is the most patient running back I've seen since Prime Bell in Pittsburgh. Interesting comp. I kind of like it.
I love
actually. It. Yeah. Okay. Next guy on my list. And I've got Dobbins at like 16 this week for what it's worth. Brian Robinson. I like Brian Robinson this week. It's easy to say after he ran for 133 yards, but last week against the G-Men, but also the Bengals, they're going to be starting me and you at defensive tackle this week. They're so riddled by injury in the interior defensive line. And let's face it, they were struggling to stop the run against the Pats earlier this season. I think this is a really nice matchup for Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, Robinson's a guy where we saw last year him take a step forward, and then the redraft market sort of was looking at more of a split. He's returned value, and we saw this from Robinson last year where he got off to a very, very fast start to the season last year, and then it tailed off a little bit. I think Washington is sort of going to be forced to use him. It takes a lot of pressure off the young quarterback on the road in a kind of a difficult matchup for Washington. So for me, I think Robinson is safe. I think he's very much a running back 2 this week, probably a mid-level RB2 this week, probably somewhere around RB 18. I would imagine would be about where to value him. Not sure where you have him.
I have Robinson. I'm pulling up my ranks right now, and people, you can follow along. I've got him at 15. I'm very bullish on him.
Okay.
Brian Robinson, we're talking about, by the way, people, if not just him, he is him this week, just this week though. But I think, and the thing is, Eckler even looked okay last week too. So I think that's something I would kind of pay attention to a little bit, is like, does he work his way in a little bit more? Eckler could be the fly in the ointment. They might kind of work his way in a little bit, but I think there's enough running to go around. Even Daniels is going to run a lot too. Because let's face it, they're not a throwing team. I think we got to realize this.
Yeah, I think it's really a offense where we've got to adjust our expectations. It's Jaden Daniels, it's the running backs, and I think Eckler, for me, it's really he caps Robinson's upside because he's going to steal touches on a weekly basis.
Yep.
But I still think at the end of the day, Robinson's going to finish ahead of where he finished last year in terms of the running back scoring. If you drafted Robinson, you got to feel really pretty strongly about it.
I agree. I agree a lot there. What are you doing in Kansas City? Isaiah Pacheco out. He's on IR. He's going to be gone. Indefinite timeline. He's gone from like 4 to 6 to 8 to indefinite now with that fractured fibula. Are you all over Carson Steele? Are you all over, going back to the, going back to the well here and going back with Kareem Hunt? Are you sneaking in a cheap Samaje Perine where he's available? What are you doing here?
I think that Samaje Perine's role might be the most static throughout the entire season. I think they're going to see what they can get out of Carson Steele. The argument for Carson Steele is short yardage and goal line work. But at the end of the day, I think Perine's going to catch some passes. I think it's going to be more of a split than people are kind of comfortable with, where you're not going to get that excited about starting either one of these guys. I think that they'd both be considered probably like on the RB3-4 line this week. Mm-hmm. The hope being that one of them sort of runs away with it. But it sounds to me like Kareem Hunt, they're putting him on the practice squad. I'm not sure. We saw this last year where Leonard Fournette, like we kept thinking Leonard Fournette was going to be a thing. Like Kareem Hunt, he scored 9 touchdowns last year, and he had a number of weeks where it was RB3 level production, but he was out there as a free agent for a while. Had the 2 touchdowns in the playoff loss to Houston. So that was the last time we saw him on a field, but who knows how long it takes him to ramp up. I think that they're going to try to get all they can out of Steele and Perine. And we also have CEH, who's going to be back sooner than later, too. So this could be a full-on committee. I think the way that I'm looking at it is I elevate Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice, you're going to see even more manufactured looks for him, especially early on in the scripted drives to start out the game. I think Rashee Rice ticks up. I think Xavier Worthy is going to have a few more potential to have a few more manufactured rush attempts. So for me, I'm looking to tick up the receivers, and I'm not really looking to drop a bag this week in Fab on either one of those running backs. But Perine for me, if I had to pick one, because I think that there's a non-zero chance it becomes something like a Jerick McKinnon role with less explosiveness, a guy that we can stick in our flex, stick in our RB as an RB3 production, and have some valuable weeks as a receiver. Steele is like a 4.8 40 guy. He doesn't bring a whole lot of like dynamic ability, but he is a hard runner that can convert around the goal line. So the only way he sort of beats you is if he falls in the end zone a ton of times. But Perine, I think you've seen back-to-back seasons with 2 separate offensive coordinators have pushed him to over 50 receptions. That's not an insignificant number at the running back position.
Yeah. Another fly in the ointment. It could be Mecole Hardman jet sweep season too. Remember that game against the Niners a couple of years ago where he ran like 3 of those?
You always get the random Mecole game every year. You get like at least one of those.
Absolutely. We're going to talk wide receivers next, but first, you got a quick note from our next sponsor, and that is the good folks from Vivid. NFL football is back. Gear up for the gridiron with Vivid seats and score tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every touchdown, every tackle, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team, live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you earn perks with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash it in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, ROTOWIRE. From the upper deck to the front row, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Visit Vivid Seats. Experience it live. Here with Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler. Let's talk wide receivers, Theo. We got an interesting bucket here because we got a lot of injured wide receivers right now. Debo is out. Kupp is out. Puka is out. A.J. Brown is out. Opportunities are opening up all over the place here. Brandon Ayuk, do we elevate him to wide receiver 1 status right now? Are you using him in DFS?
I am not. I actually think that he's having trouble ramping up. Certainly, if he would have caught that touchdown in week 1, people would have been a little like the stat line would look good, look better than it is now. But Debo has out-targeted him this year 19-10. I think Debo being out this week, the guy that I would look to use in DFS would be George Kittle. I think this
Yes.
screams a George Kittle week. And I also am not opposed to throwing a dart at Jawan Jennings. I wrote about him in my waiver wire column. They paid him. He's had some random decent weeks. And I think that right now, he's pretty much even up with Brandon Ayuk in terms of total targets for the year. Ayuk will get going, but it's not a week where we want to like, oh, Debo's out, so this therefore is going to be this huge Brandon Ayuk game. I think it's taking him a while to get going. We'd love to see him find the end zone this week, but I want to temper expectations. I think long term, Ayuk's going to be fine. He's a terrific football player, but just doesn't look completely there like we saw last year.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's a Kittle week.
Yeah, I think it is too. Kittle's the top of my tight end ranks this week. And I'm glad you mentioned Jawan Jennings. He was my priority in Scott Fishbowl waiver wire. I got him. I did not get him in some other leagues where I got outbid, including the Sirius XM host league that I'm in. That was frustrating, but hey, good on you guys. I mean, the point is I was trying to play a little small ball this week. I wasn't going to swing big for any of the KC backs. I think there's all sorts of like interesting options, but there's no Jordan Mason league winner type guys this week.
Yeah, this was not a week to unload the clip on the fab, which is really unfortunate because so many people lost guys to injury, and there wasn't like that one savior to bail out a guy with a ton of fab or a guy with priority number one.
Gun to the head, you have to take a Rams receiver. Which one is it?
This week, Demarcus Robinson. I'm interested to see Jordan Whittington, how he ticks up. He could be a guy that they look to, manufacture looks for. He has ability with Yak. He's the kind of guy that you could use on some of those motion routes that we saw last year with Puka Nacua and we saw early this year with Cooper Kupp. Someone's going to catch passes there. I think all three of them are wide receivers you want to take shots on and have on your roster and see how this thing shakes out. But Demarcus Robinson had a nice run last year. I think he's going to fill into the like de facto wide receiver one role. He would be sort of the safest bet to get 7 targets, I think, in this game. He's sort of a capped upside type guy, but he would be the one that I would bet on.
Yeah, me too. It is kind of last week was kind of the rise of the rookies. We saw Malik Neighbors get 18 targets, 25 targets on the year. I don't want to overstate the case here, but it was kind of funny. Oh, Malik Neighbors, he may get to 150 targets. We may have been kind of cautious with that projection. He may get more than that with the Giants, although you only get to play the Commanders twice, unfortunately.
That's right. This is a tilting week for Malik Neighbors, fantasy managers like myself. Neighbors is my guy. I said before in the preseason that I thought both him and Marvin Harrison Jr. would finish as wide receiver ones. Neighbors last week had the most targets of a Giant since 2016 with Odell Beckham had a 20 target week. And Neighbors, that was the highest target share for any player in like 9 years. So the offense is featuring him. It's complete Malik Neighbors. And now they're going up against a buzzsaw defense that could effectively shut them down this week if things go poorly. So this is a tilting one. If Malik Neighbors puts up a big scoreline against this defense, then it's complete wheels up for the rest of the season. He's going to have spike weeks, but can he do it on a weekly basis? The guy is so good, but he's definitely limited by aspects of this offense.
For sure. Absolutely there. Malik Neighbors versus Jameson Williams this week. We love what Jameson Williams has done so far this season. 20 targets on the year, 200 yards. Arizona game should be a shootout a little bit there, but do we trust Williams? Would you use him? Who would you use first in this week?
I think for me, it's going to be Malik Neighbors. And I love Jameson Williams, but it's Malik Neighbors for me. Malik Neighbors is safely inside of wide receiver one territory for me this week. I'd have Jameson Williams somewhere in the wide receiver 2 range. But I think that this Arizona Detroit game has a chance to really, really pop off. But when it comes to Neighbors, it's the volume, the schemed looks. I wouldn't be surprised if against this defense, they use him on a little bit more screens, which is something we really haven't seen, but he was so effective at when he was at LSU. So for me, it's Neighbors, Jameson Williams, clearly behind him, but I'm excited to start both of them. Both of them extremely explosive guys and look like huge ADP wins.
One more receiver to talk about, Jackson Smith-Njigba. A lot of people on him this year. We saw it come to fruition this past week against the Pats. I love him. Top 30 receiver for me this week. Are you confidently starting him on a weekly basis?
Well, I think we saw what the Ryan Grubb offense looks like without Ken Walker. Week 1, they really tried to establish Ken Walker. Ken Walker gets hurt, and we see a almost 70% pass play on their, like, I think it was like 69.5 percent of their plays last week were a pass attempt. And how can you not be excited about Jackson Smith and Jigba after he gets 16 targets? And he did it in a game where DK had 14 targets. So that was the third most targets DK's ever had in his career. And this was a historical game where Geno Smith has his most completions ever. Geno Smith has his most pass attempts ever, and 2 players combined for 30 targets. They really got away from the run game. Zach Charbonnet is a guy where they look to use as a receiver out of the backfield way more. So for me, this is tailor-made for JSN to have another game. It's Miami coming into town. This is a big one for Seattle. They have a chance to win another one. And I think JSN, we're not going to get 16 targets. We're not going to get necessarily like 20-point PPR weeks, but I think he's a guy that we can safely project to be like a 13, 14 point per game guy, because this offense seems to love him. And if this Ken Walker injury lingers, then I think that the JSN projections could move up just slightly.
Absolutely. I agree. I got a super chat from Brownie Munchers. 12-man league: Goff, Jefferson, Olave, Achane, Gibbs, Hunter Henry, Bigsby, Williams, Myers. He just traded. Here's the key part. Just traded George Kittle, Neighbors, who we've been talking about, and Romeo Doubs for Jamar Chase. Big 3 for 1. I mean, this is at the beginning of the season. You might think this is okay. Do you think this is okay now?
I don't think it's gonna necessarily kill him, because he's got a pretty strong roster with guys like Achane, Jefferson, Gibbs. But I don't know if I would have done this. I think that Neighbors could be giving you 90% of the Chase production, and Kittle gives you this complete edge at the tight end position. I think Kittle's the big winner with Debo out. And also just just kind of game theory, the state of the tight end position right now, George Kittle gives you a really strong edge. Multiple players hurt, multiple players not hitting. Kyle Pitts being a big disappointment in terms of usage. Dalton Kincaid hasn't got it going. So Kittle, for me, gives you a little bit of an edge. I probably lean towards the package on this one, but you could still ship it. You got a nice looking squad with a lot of explosiveness. So good luck to you, Brownie Munchers.
Yep. I think the key here is Hunter Henry. I think if Hunter Henry is a startable tight end all season long, then you're fine. If it's the fringe guy that we thought he was at the start of the season, then it's a little dicier there.
He had the smash week to start out last year and then tailed off.
Yes,
but
he did.
This was a little different because the pass volume was so low. His smash week last year also coincided with Mac Jones having that insane amount of pass attempts. So I think Hunter Henry is fine. Alex Van Pelt got a career year out of David Njoku last year. And hey, this could be the random one. We always see one, Jeff. We always see one of these tight end 2s finish as like a top 8 finisher. So maybe it's Hunter Henry's year with that.
Maybe so. We're going to talk about one other tight end, but first, NFL Kickoff is here, and Fanduel is giving away a special new user offer to RotoWire fans. Sign up and bet $5 on any Fanduel market and receive $200 in bonus bets, plus 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket. Visit sportsbook.fanduel.com or download Fanduel Sportsbook in the App Store today to claim this offer. All right, let's talk tight ends real quick here. One in particular, a lot of Dalton Kincaid angst out there. Not too many targets the first 2 weeks of the season. Are we worried that this new offense under Joe Brady is going to minimize Kincaid? Is it as simple as with and without Dawson Knox? What's your thoughts on Dalton Kincaid?
So this is a player that, if you follow any of my content at Player Profiler, I was very bullish on, and I have some Dalton Kincaid. I'm of the opinion that we're going to see some big weeks for him. I think that sort of everything went well for Buffalo last week against Miami. The run game was hitting. James Cook gets all those touchdowns. The week before was really kind of the tilting one, but it seems like Arizona was trying to take away Kincaid. I think it's a little bit too early to get super nervous. I've seen some like complete panic questions regarding Kincaid, but this is a player that they drafted in the first round. This is a player that had a number of strong weeks last year. And this offense, I still don't think this offense has fully figured it out. Both of the games were weird. And I think we'll start seeing a little bit more normalcy. They need consistent targets. They're not going to be able to run the ball as well as they did against Miami every single week. So for this one, I think like let's all chill out and let's see kind of where this thing goes. And if you're self-scouting and you're on the coaching staff for Buffalo, you got to be saying we got to get Kincaid involved a little bit more early on. So for me, I'm not like in pure panic, but I'm in like a slight panic. Not pure panic though.
A lot of tight ends that waste. LaPorta people are unhappy. Kelce people are unhappy. Pitts people are unhappy. That's a permanent state, which is me, by the way. I went back to the well. I'm not.
Pitts might be the most concerning one for me because Pitts had the random touchdown in week 1 where it was like a busted coverage, but the air yard share. We were told all summer that you're going to get all these air yards, all these downfield looks for Pitts, and it's like a 10% air yard share. And the guy's getting outperformed by Ray McLeod. So for me, like I'm very concerned about Kyle Pitts. But like you said, tight end is sort of a wasteland right now. That whole Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, Evan Engram tier, it's nightmare. All kind of and the one who's really hitting, Brock Bowers, looks like the greatest tight end alive right now. And he's the true ADP value. Isaiah likely fell back to earth in week 2, so tight end is a weird one right now for sure. I think we still don't know. Let's look back at like week 5, and I think we'll have a better idea of the tight end position.
I agree. We got to write it out. Abbreviated podcast today. We got to jump out of here, but I want to thank everybody jumping in on the stream. Thanks for the super chat. Brownie Munchers, appreciate you. Thanks everybody for joining in. Thanks to Theo Gremminger for joining us right now. Make sure to check him out on Twitter. Check out Player Profiler. Check out his awesome podcast as well. Check him out at The OG Fantasy. Thanks for listening to RotoWire. Have a good day.